I'm not your friend, my mother would declare all the time. It's something some of my friends share in common with me, and apparently Lisa Marie Presley. The obsession the women that raised us had to declare they were not our friends or a safe space. They were there to make sure we stayed alive via having food and a roof, of which they would remind us forever they did that, and claim it was symbolic of their love, but behave like it was some burden or duty, especially because Lord knows our fathers didn't take up that duty or love. Now I'm older, and I think my mother wants to get along with me more, but still uses the same I'm not your friend method to do it. I can't blame her, though. We were born amidst a long line of non friends, aka moms. When I was a kid, my grandmother would gang up on my mom via her friends and me. She would turn the room against her as if she was some maniacal moron. To be honest, I felt a relief when my grandmother went off on my mom because, in a sad, twisted way, I saw it as just desserts or some form of defense. Finally, I was not always the one scolded and scalped by adults, and in particular, by her. I assumed that in feeling what I felt via the incessant yelling and verbal diminishing of her worth via her own mom, maybe she would turn around and say, "Oh my God, do I make you feel that way?" Yet my mom, like her mom, always had an excuse. She did not yell till her face became red and slam things. She was simply a loud talker with klutzy hands, which is why she monitored my volume and how I moved things around. When my grandmother would taunt my mother, for the most part, she stayed quiet, or at times had a mental breakdown where she begged my grandmother to leave her alone, only to ignite my grandma's indignation that her child needed space from her. In my mother's head, because she only felt her own pain, nothing compared to the harsh tongue lashings she was receiving. Yet the ones she would give me could be so rough, I'm surprised they did not leave physical welts. They sure left spiritual scars. I watched my mother be victim to how she mistreated me, and now I realize if she's becoming my grandmother, then am I becoming her? When it comes to my grandmother will never let her win anything. There's no thanks needed when you are serving your debt collector, and my mother was the same, which is why I'm shocked she is shocked that I do not find her my safe space. Whenever I visit, she says, "Mi casa es tu casa," but then proceeds to tell me every bill paid in that casa that has surged since my arrival. I guess two people drinking water boosts the tap price. Everything is price marked, and conversations run on a limit, usually ending with an order or one of her anxieties over my life. Now I'm more willing to be more honest with my mom and my discomfort with that energy, only to find she shuts down, yells at me, or claims some sort of physical ailment must cut the conversation. All things my grandmother did. Suddenly I'm at a crossroads. If my dad did not love me and my mother was not loving towards me, who actually did care for me? All my life I took care of me, and I felt my parents praise themselves because I did not end up an addicted thief like my dad. Yet that was also not my nature or calling. To be honest, I would easily be defined as a nerd. I studied, watched TV, and played by myself. My mother came home, claimed I cleaned nothing or felt sick, and just rested. I was on my own, and such a good kid that of course you would say was parenting. I never answered back and often would get hit out of my mom's impatience. So really speed was my killer. I had a recipe to thrive. She paid the bills, and all I had to do was entertain myself and get good grades. Anything like emotional connection, I could just, get with myself via creativity. And all her yelling and claiming I did nothing right was just prep for the world. Yet if you ask my mom, none of that happened. And she's begun the strange narrative my grandmother took with her that somehow I became a disrespectful adult that calls her a bad mom at every mountaintop she could find via the Q Metro line. I've become her strength and the undertaker of her insecurities, at the cost of having any stamina to even feel or acknowledge the ones I have for myself, including those started by her. Hence, this makes me fear my reality and my future because I was never my mother's daughter. I was her emotional purse. It was a frequent thing in my family. The women were the emotional and psychological foundation to their much messier men, and became angry and bitter only towards their fellow women, aka their sisters or daughters, judging them harshly for how they breathed over how the boys acted. It's why our childhood was really a gender divide. The boys got to be free while the girls got to be watched and trained to watch as well. We were not kids, we were caretakers, raised to take care of everyone, and that doing that in some ways meant we were taking care of ourselves. If our mother was happy with us, then we were happy with ourselves. If our dad was happy with us, then our mother was happy with us, which meant we were happy with ourselves. The problem is, I come from a long line of women that were never happy with their daughter. My grandmother's mother did not like her, and she did not like my mother. And I feel like the biggest fool to think my mother likes me if my whole life she told me I'm not your friend, and has proven that. All right, let's discuss, let's heal. I really want to approach that concept of I'm not your friend parenting. And it's something, yeah, this episode, and I want to like divide it more. I don't want to overwhelm you with my stories and my growth because I want to pick up the nuances too. But I was thinking about this week because I went out with one of my little cousins, who's like my sister, and my aunt said, I'm not your friend to her. And then my mother and my aunt went on this huge thing about how you're not supposed to be friends with your kids, but now we're older, like we're in our 20s and we're in our 30s, and there's this weird thing that they're doing of I want to be closer to you, but I still want to maintain this kind of fear-based concept of you will respect me and you have to give me love because I'm going to pay for the dinner tonight. You know? Cuz that was the thing too. My aunt wanted to do like this small little thank you dinner to my mom because my mom really helped her out and she was paying for everything, and then that became the thing, of why I'm not your friend, I'm paying. And that's another reason, that's a whole other conversation about like money, owning people and owning your kids like property because you pay for them. But I really want to focus on that idea of I'm not your friend. And I went to that dinner, and me and my sister, I'll call her my sister because I do love her like a sister, and she's my little baby. We were talking, and um, we were laughing because they don't see how harsh they are on us. Not just that they were. When we were kids, they were extremely harsh on us. No, 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 no. We learned the power of no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. And then they'll like all talk about that one time we went to Disney as like the definitive of we all had a great childhood. And I'm like, I remember the Disney trip. Everybody was complaining about how expensive Coke was. If we wanted a toy, we could look at them. We weren't getting them. The lines were a thing. Oh my God, this line is 2 hours. Like, come on. Like, let's talk about the Disney trip, okay? But they they like have these like built-in memory cards of these moments that are really their highlights of parenting. I took you to Disney. And remember that fantastic Sweet 16 I threw you? And they don't even remember the process. Like my mother always, I had a great Sweet 16. And she did a fantastic job. She really did. Like she planned it because she didn't allow me to plan it. She made sure everything was perfect because I had no say. Like, are you picking up the dynamic? Like, she took it and she did a great job, but I didn't have a say in any of it. And anytime I tried to, I would get so scolded. Oh, you have poor taste. That's not classy. That's not cool. Why are you inviting this person? You have to invite my friends. Like, it was her party for me. And in many ways, my childhood was her childhood for me. And when we have these like discussions that always end up in fights, so we just stop talking about it, and now I'm talking to you about it. I think she's hurt because she really did live out her childhood via me, and she can't imagine that there were things I didn't want, and that there were like I would have loved to have more say in like my own parties, Like, and it's so funny because that's something my mom would complain about. My grandmother was very religious, and it is the epicenter of her life that she would always take my mother out of the parties and do this like photo shoot with La Virgen. And then like my mother would get, instead of Barbies, like Rosarios and like Virgen de Guadalupe statues, Saint Michael statues. Like it's a trauma. Like my mom has no religious statues. Like there's not even a picture of Jesucristo. Like it is a trauma. And they were really poor, so and we were too. Like so when you're poor, my mother was a little richer, obviously, than her own childhood, but she acts like we were Kardashians and we couldn't afford things. We had to save up, and even when we saved, we were counting. And then that counting energy, if you said that it was killing the moment, then you were being ungrateful because it's like, oh, money, 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 money. And she would often complain about like wishing she could have a say in her party and not realizing that she did have a say in a child's party, mine. And she did the same thing to me. I couldn't have a say in my own. And it, I think she thinks because she ran the show a bit more lavishly and a little bit friendlier. I don't want to even say friendlier, but a little more lavishly. She did well. Because what kid wouldn't love Disney? But I didn't have a say on all the rides, you know? Like it was all a little cut. And especially if we were hanging out with my family, oh my God, I really didn't not have any say on any event. And I sometimes feel that reflects in my life. I don't have a say in my own life. I think I'm still chasing parental approval. And I just replace my parents with friends or exes or bosses that are never going to hear me unless I'm saying something that boosts their ego, boosts their spirit, or they wish I was saying something against their spirit, against their ego, so they could dump on me their insecurities. Like, I'm not there. And I really had this existential crisis because, which I always do, I think every episode starts like that. Because I went out to eat with a friend and we were talking about the weirdness of having our mothers want to be our friends while still not understanding that we have the unfriendliest childhood and we still don't have that dynamic. It's almost like they're demanding because of that Disney trip to be our friends while still wanting to yell at us, while still judging us, while still telling us what to do, even though we're older. And the same thing happens with my grandmother and my mom of like, there are these moments where my grandmother is really shocked that my mom is cold or distant or doesn't want to talk and just says, hello and goodbye and making sure you're okay. We were raised to take care of each other, but not necessarily to be close to each other, not necessarily to be genuinely connected to each other. Because genuine connection is when we both have a say, when we both talk, when we both decide, when you take the lead and then sometimes I take the lead. And we come from a background of like the child is a property. They don't have autonomy, they don't have a say, they would never know how to take the lead, which is why sometimes when I complained about my father's abuse to my mom, I felt a giant resentment to her because I may be a kid, but kids don't cry like this, kids don't say this. And it was, she too marked me with that sensitive, you're just sensitive, you're just sensitive. And I feel bad that there's a part of me that is still that little girl that will love for her mom to love her and be loving towards her and be gentle and soft and sweet and hold me and say the greatest words and say how amazing and thank me when I show up for her and when I take care of her. But that just has never happened and that never will. And now she wants to be closer to me while still doing those dynamics of, why do you hate me? Why do you always say I'm a bad mom? Why do you think that? And I don't, because now I'm her. And I would watch my grandmother tear my mom apart, and she either stay quiet or just say, please stop. And I do the same thing. And I feel, how do I break this pattern? Even if I don't have a daughter, how do I remove that energy from me? Because I don't want to be a villain unbeknownst to me. And that's why I started Daddy Recovery. My father taught me you can be a horrible human being because somebody was horrible to you. And my mother taught me you could never be good to yourself because someone was horrible to you. And there is difference in that, which is why I say my dad abused me, but my mother was mean to me. And there are different extremities. And I think the extremities and the differences lie in love. I do feel my mother loves me, but there's also this just general logical human question of, how could you love somebody you don't know? How could you love somebody you're not friends with? Check out daddyrecovery.com for my stories. Check out deandreviewsitall.com for my reviews, and check out both for my artist journey, because Hardin is here. Hi. Follow me. Love you.